Now that we've looked at some specific closing statements, let's look at some notes. I actually stole these from a law school. I believe it was Rice University down in Houston. But these are the notes from one of their professors about things that the people in uh, their school of law could do to improve a closing statement. Thought it was kind of interesting. A lot of these are some of the language skills that we've talked about in some of the previous units, and certainly when we're talking about, once again, the how to win an argument and argumentative writing, argumentative speech. It's a good idea to keep some of these things in mind. For example, trilogies. For some reasons known only to those folks who study such things, the human mind seems to hang on to things that come in threes longer than it does than things that come solo or in any other combination, uh, which is very true. It's my understanding that that's why phone numbers are in groups. They break those into groups of 3 and 4. Social security numbers, the same thing, because those numbers are just easy to remember. There is something poetic and memorable about trilogies. So look for opportunities to build trilogies into your argument. Those who doubt the power of the trilogy need only to look at those built into their own history. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, blood, sweat, and tears, red, white, and blue. Those things do stick with us. The second is metaphors, obviously something we talked about with short stories and poetry. Sentiments which can be difficult to understand when expressed in the abstract can be made much more real and memorable through the use of metaphorical word pictures. Not only do such word pictures capture our imagination and therefore our memories more than abstract concepts can, they also appeal to our senses in ways that words do not alone. We already talked about how poetry was supposed to be masterful communication, say more with less. So it makes sense that you can do the same in an argument. An example, all his life he'd been pricked with the sharp needles of humiliation. For a person who's never suffered such intense humiliation in their lives, to have it described as pricked with sharp needles, that's an experience that someone can relate to and therefore hopefully draw a connection to how this person felt and build a little empathy. Alliteration, another poetic device found here in our list of things to build in there. A series of words that begin or include the same sound tend to be more memorable and more powerful than those with no auditory connection to one another. Examples: a small time snitch searching for someone to sacrifice. Once again, that repetition of the S sound there is going to make it stick in people's heads. Close enough for Callahan, talking about the sloppy investigating officer. Oh, well, he couldn't find this piece of evidence, or, so he did, but close enough for Callahan. Repeat that 3 or 4 times and see that that doesn't stick with your jury. Like most teenagers, she was curious and confused, seduced and scared. Once again, those alliterative words are going to stick with the jury when they go back to deliberate. Quotations. Not only are quotations a much more succinct and powerful way of making a point we want to make, they also invoke the imprimatur of wisdom of the ages upon the actions of your client. I like that, the wisdom of the ages. Where your client remained at the scene until police arrived, you may want to invoke the wisdom of Proverbs, a book from the Bible. The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous stand bold as a lion. It makes sense if your client was caught at the scene of the crime. Yeah, why would he run if he's not guilty? It's the person who runs, that's the guilty party. The righteous stand bold as a lion. Or if you want to highlight how a witness has been caught in his own lies, there's always Sir Walter Scott's wonderful quote, "Oh, what tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive." Once again, another great quote, because lies really do weave this web, and it can get quite tangled when someone tries to walk themselves when they've been caught in a lie. How about analogies? It's similar to a metaphor, but a little bit broader. It's sometimes easier for us to understand a situation if we can analogize it into an experience or story that is familiar to us. This is true for jurors as well. Fairy tales, children's stories, or everyday experiences can all be valuable tools for an analogy in a closing argument. For example, when I was a little boy, my mother would cook spaghetti every Saturday. Watch her as she made her delicious sauce. She would start with the tomatoes and add the basil, garlic, salt, pepper, and Italian seasoning, and lots of ground meat. Then she would stir all the ingredients with a large wooden spoon. One day, while stirring her famous pasta sauce, she saw a cockroach in the pot. Now, what do you think she did? Did she just scoop out the part that had the cockroach in it and let us eat the rest? Or did she get rid of the whole pot of spaghetti sauce? Now, when Mr. Hunter told you that he was looking at a life sentence and did not expect anything from his cooperation with the state, do we digest that lie with the rest of his testimony, or do we throw his entire story out? Doesn't take much to taint the entire pot of sauce. Perfect little analogy. You've got something disgusting floating in the pot of spaghetti sauce. Are you going to eat around that absolutely disgusting thing, or are you going to throw out the entire pot and start over again? I would hope that you would start over again. Maybe a cockroach isn't disgusting enough for you, but insert whatever you wouldn't eat around here. And it makes sense, once again, if we are going to be talking about someone who has been caught in a lie. It's like, okay, now their entire testimony has been tainted. Do we listen to anything they have to say, or do we just throw the whole thing out because of that disgusting lie lying there right in the middle of it? Nice little analogy. Last, silence. This is an incredibly powerful tool, often overlooked by lawyers who are uncomfortable with it. And judging from some of the early seminars we've had, I know that maybe you guys are not very comfortable with silence either, but it can be really powerful in making an argument. Use silence at the beginning of your closing argument to build tension in the courtroom and gather attention of your audience. Have you ever been in a noisy classroom when the teacher suddenly stopped talking? You can literally watch the silence move row by row all the way to the back of the room until every eye is turned to the teacher, and you could literally hear a pin drop in the room. Okay, that has not been my experience, certainly not this year, but silence can be a powerful tool in a courtroom. When you do sit there, when everybody lets that silence hang for a second, they will hang on that next word. That level of attention is what you want to use for your benefit in a courtroom. You can get it easily and instantly just by using silence. Use silence during your argument as a nonverbal parenthesis around to set apart and emphasize a powerful point, or to let an argument float in the air a bit before moving on to the next one. Give jurors time not only to taste, but to savor your point before moving on to the next one. If you're giving a closing statement and you just hit them with a bombshell, like this is it, this is the moment where I, turn the tide and I'm there convinced. You can't just move on. If that's your big point, pause for a moment. Let that point hang in the air. Let that point stew inside of their heads so that they can grasp the severity of what you've just said. Use silence at the end of your argument after you've said your last words. Simply stand for a moment, meeting the eyes of each of your jurors, letting your last words soak in before you simply and softly say thank you and return to your seat. All that will happen when you sit down is the prosecutor starts talking again. That alone is worth postponing. But if silence also again gives the jurors time to savor and absorb your argument and to note your obvious belief in what you're saying as you solidly stand your ground and meet their eyes, absolutely. When you finish the closing statement, when you finish the argument, let it stand for a moment before you move on. These are tricks that obviously they are tricks. They're a little bit gimmicky, but at the same time, they will help you win an argument. And so when we look at Atticus Finch's closing statement in your reading tonight, we are going to look at it tomorrow and analyze it, kind of evaluate it, looking for some of these things that are contained within it. Thank you.